Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if it is your first time checking us out. We are a fairly new YouTube channel, so that may be the case. Today we are going to talk about ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, pros, cons, and should you consider one if you're going to build a custom home. All right, like I said, today we're going to talk a little bit about ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. Before we get into that though, let me just take a real quick minute just to remind everybody, our channel is everything about building a custom home. So the planning, the financing, the actual construction of a home, just anything that you might want to be thinking about as you're maybe thinking about going down that path of building a custom home. That's what our channel is all about, to make sure you guys get all the information to help you make the best decisions possible and decide if it's even something you even want to do. So like I said, if that is good information for you, please take the time, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell so you get all the notifications. We're posting new content every week. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can always reach out to us, call, text, email, hit us up in the comments, whatever is easiest for you. Again, we just want to make sure you have all the information if this is something that you're thinking about building a custom home. All right, so like I said, today we're going to talk about ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. So I'll just call them ADUs from now on. So this is a term that it seems like it's become more popular lately than what it has been over the last like 10, 20, 30 years even. So accessory dwelling units can be, it's essentially, think of it as its own separate living quarter. So it has a bedroom, it has a kitchen or kitchenette, and it has a bathroom, and then typically like a small living space, or sometimes it's just more like a suite where the bedroom and living space are kind of all combined. So these units can be inside of the house, they could be inside of a primary residence. A lot of the times we'll see them in maybe a loft, or kind of up in the attic space, potentially up above the garage. That's something that we're building a lot of right now, are homes that have a higher truss roof line above the garage. And if it's a 3 or 4 car garage, a lot of times you can get a really nice ADU up above the garage. It could also be down in the basement, a separate section of the basement, and even detached if you're on a larger lot and it allows for a separate structure. Sometimes the ADU will even be a separate structure from the main house. Other things, more commonly you'll hear ADUs called mother-in-law suites. Sometimes I've heard them called granny flats, as our aging parents tend to move in with this nowadays a little bit. So there's a lot of different terms that you'll hear associated with ADUs. So that's what an ADU is in general. And then what about why would you think about having an ADU? And like I said, what are some of those pros and cons of it? So typically for us, as we have clients that are looking to build, and they're considering an ADU, I would say 9 out of 10 times it comes down to their specific family situation. And it really comes down to maybe having some younger kiddos, that are, I shouldn't say younger kiddos, but grown kids that are younger, maybe like young adults, and just, man, housing prices are kind of crazy nowadays, or maybe they're going to college locally. So they just need another place to stay, and having that ADU inside of the parent's house, but it's not staying in the parent's basement like what we kind of think about used to be back in the day. This is truly a separate living area where they can have their privacy. They can come and go as they want to, but honestly, they're saving a buck because they're living at an ADU at their parent's house. So that's one thing that we see. And then on the other side of the spectrum, as you can probably imagine, is we see a lot of folks that are thinking about, or maybe currently taking care of, their aging parents. So parents that no longer can, they can't live on their own, but they don't want to go to a care facility. So we see that quite often where folks are bringing their parents or one of the parents into their house. But again, not only does the parent want their own, kind of their separate space, their personal space, their independence, but also it's healthy for the family if they're, sometimes separate as well. So that's the other place that we see ADUs being requested. So a lot of times it comes down to what the unique family situation is, as far as why they might want a total separate living area within the house, or at least on the property. So family situation is a big thing that we see. Another thing that we see right now is, all of us have heard of Airbnb and VRBO, and it's only becoming increasingly more popular. So a lot of folks are saying, you know what, maybe whenever I design my build, I want to put an ADU in so that I can rent that out as a short-term rental. Now, of course, there's a lot of, just zoning, local ordinances, municipality concerns, things like that. So you just definitely want to make sure that if it's something you're considering from a rental perspective, potentially income, you want to make sure that you've checked with all the local ordinances to include HOA of the specific community. And you just really want to make sure that it's something that's going to be allowed, so you don't spend all the money to build an ADU thinking you're going to rent it out to help offset your mortgage a little bit, only to find out that you can't actually do it. So the rental potential is another thing we see right now. So family situation, rental potential, and then some folks, they just like to have people over to the house. Maybe they have some friends that travel the country a lot, or maybe different groups of friends, and they have long-term guests at their house, but man, you don't want them just staying in like the spare bedroom, kind of stepping over top of the kids' toys and all that stuff. You want them to have their own space. We see this more in larger homes where folks just say, you know what, we want to have a totally separate living space. So if we have somebody come and stay, whether it's for a night, a weekend, a week, or maybe a couple months, that they have their own space to really just feel comfortable. Again, they have their privacy, so they don't have to be around the host family if they don't want to be, but they're right next to them, so they can be if they want to socialize. So those are really the three main things that we see, three main reasons people consider an ADU. So let's talk some of kind of the pros and cons of it. There's probably more pros and cons. I'll just say that to begin with. One of the biggest things that we get a lot of questions about is this going to be a value add to our property, or is it actually going to hinder the value of our property? And hands down, it's a value add to the property. I don't know if this is true or if this really works out on the resale side of it. We haven't really sold enough resale homes with ADUs to see, at least not in our area, to really kind of have good data on this. But I saw some numbers the other day, and it said that for an ADU, the way that they kind of calculated the value of it, addition to the home, was to say 100 times whatever the monthly rent would be. So say if you have an ADU and it's going to rent for $2,000 a month, then that would equate to adding $200,000 in value to your property. Now, is that really true? Again, at least in our area, we haven't sold enough homes to really know exactly what those numbers are going to look like. I said, again, ADUs are becoming more and more popular now. So I don't know if that's a good number to work off of, but I don't think it's too far off, honestly. If you have an ADU, and especially like if you are in an area that someone can rent that out as a short-term rental, because that's so popular nowadays, I think that's a big value add for a lot of people, especially if it can help them offset their mortgage, especially in this world where we have crazy, mortgage rates going right now. So that's definitely a big benefit. So it is a value add to your property. The flip side negative of that is, yeah, you added value to the property, but you still had to spend the money to build it to begin with. So I will say that it doesn't take $200,000 to add an ADU to your property if you're doing a custom home build. Now, could you spend $200,000 on an ADU? You certainly could, especially if you're going to do a guest house or a cottage or something like that, where it's a separate detached structure. That cost could very easily get to $200,000, probably a good bit more. But if you're doing an ADU that's maybe in the basement with a separate entry, or it's above the garage in a loft space like that, you can probably do it for less than $200,000 extra to get something that would probably rent for about that amount. So the pro of it is that it's definitely value add to your property. The con is, hey, you got to pay for it up front whenever you're going to do the build. But I think from that standpoint, definitely something you want to take a look at, because I think the numbers can make a whole lot of sense. Now, if it's just for friends and family and there's not going to be any rental income coming in from it, that's probably a little bit different story. And then it's just really your personal situation. You've got to figure out, if it's for a son or daughter that is going to be staying local, how does that offset with what they might be paying in rent? Are they helping offset that cost a little bit? And then again, on the flip side, if it's an aging parent that's going to be in the home, how much is that cost savings versus a care facility to just be in the house so you can take care of them as well, which they probably enjoy a little bit more too. And then the other thing that we get a lot of that has a pro and a con to it is the resale piece of it. So if I'm going to build this nice custom home and I'm going to put an ADU in it, am I going to be able to sell the house, or is it going to be a hindrance whenever I go to resell the house? Now, if you asked this question 10, 20 years ago, I don't know if we really would have had enough data to say definitively one way or the other, especially in different geographic areas where they're not quite as popular. But I will say that there's several studies that I've looked at that have said that the demand for properties with an ADU is increasing about 10% a year. So about every year, 10% more people are looking for a property that has an ADU. And I think that goes back to those first two things we talked about, with either aging parents that we're bringing into our homes to take care of, or we have a son or a daughter that just maybe needs a little bit of extra help getting started, or just because things are so expensive, it just makes a lot of sense to have them stay at the house but still give them their independence. So the demand is growing rapidly for properties with ADUs. So on the resale side, personally, I think it's a win. I think that there's enough demand that you're going to get your money, you're going to get that return on investment whenever you go to sell the property. Now, but in the same breath, I'll say that it probably is you are narrowing out some people out of your buyer pool that just don't want to have an ADU. But then you also have people that must have an ADU. It's a mandatory thing for them. So I really think the demand level probably is about a wash. And hey, if it's a wash at the end of the day, but you can get all of your money back on your property and maybe even a little bit extra, I would not be concerned about the ADU from the resale perspective. I think the demand is growing. There's a niche for it. There's a need for it right now. And I think whenever you go to sell your house in the future, that will have continued to grow as housing prices have gotten more expensive, housing inventory continues to be short. So there's just a big demand for any kind of quality housing option right now. So from the resale side, don't be concerned about an ADU. I think it's a win for you at the end of the day. So that's a little bit about ADUs. Just to recap a little bit, ADU, separate living area, either inside the house or a separate structure on the same property. It's got its own bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen, sometimes its own separate living area, and it does have a separate entrance into that from the outside. Typically, we see people, because of their unique family situation, is a reason that they're deciding to put an ADU in their property, and also some of those forward-thinking people, if you will, who are thinking about the rental income potential of it. So those are probably the two biggest reasons. The third one is people that have a lot of long-term guests at their house, or they have a lot of guests and they just want them to have their own personal space whenever they come to visit. There are pros and cons to everything, but I believe that an ADU, with the value add that you get for it and how it's going to help, it definitely won't hinder. It's at least going to be an even wash whenever you go to resell the house as far as the level of demand. But I do think you get your full return on investment back as far as dollar for dollar. So ADUs, that's a little bit about them. It's just a hot topic right now. We have a lot of people asking about them, a lot of people considering. We even have some people doing builds that have multiple ADUs in their property. So accessory dwelling units, hopefully that was good information. Again, if you have any questions about it, if you want to talk more details, definitely reach out, call, text, email. And we are a custom home builder here in the state of Colorado. So if you are in the Colorado area, we'd love to have a conversation with you to see if we might be a great fit to help you build your next custom home.